Hi, welcome everybody. This will be a special Java user group presentation, special in the fact that we have a special guest all the way from France, as well as it's not at our normally recorded time in the evening after hours. Instead, we're doing this during lunchtime. Colin is going to talk about one of his most inspiring experiences that led him to who he is today. And I will let him take care of it, take it from here on out.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me, finding me, changing the hour so I can sleep that night. It's really appreciated. So let's start with some questions in the chat so I get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell me what's your profession? Please, so I can know if you're developers, testers, managers, I don't know, product owners. Lead developer, okay. Developer, okay. Software engineer, okay. Developer, okay. Software engineer, okay. Okay, great. So mostly tech people. So my next question is, who wants to answer how on the previous question? Yeah, perhaps that sounds weird to you, but that's a real question. Who hesitates to answer that?
I'm not sure, Colin. So what's the question?
I wrote it in the chat. Perhaps if you have no idea what is it, you can't hesitate to answer that because that's a strange answer.
Yeah, I can't say that I know what you're asking there.
Yeah, I'm testing your how to say that, your cinematic knowledge. And I think Marwan got it. Yeah. I think a lot of French people got that, but I don't know if this movie is particularly famous in the US. So we'll see. Yeah, you don't know? Okay. So that's some famous intro from a film called, I guess, 300 in English, because it's 300 in French. Something about sport shot and Spartans, what's your profession? So, okay, great. So now that I know you a little bit better, I will be able to introduce myself. As you already have noticed, I'm French, as my shitty accent is probably telling you. So I'm sorry in advance for the mistake I will make on the English part of this presentation. I'm here to talk to you about something that happened in 2012. That's way back in time. At that time, I was still named Colin Damon, of course. Oh yeah, there's another game. Don't hesitate to write the anime name if you recognize any. So 2012, I was a passionate Java developer. I was working for 4 years straight as a Java developer. And I was called on how to fix bugs already. And I was staffed on challenging projects. You know, when there was a project with a lot of problems, people were sending me there, and that was great. And I started to write automated tests. So I guess that doesn't help to localize the time for you. So let's remind a little bit what happened in 2012. So perhaps some of them come to your mind. You know, the Large Hadron Collider discovered the Higgs boson. It's not really a discovery, but it's a proof. Curiosity landed on Mars. Usain Bolt became a legend. Some crazy guy jumps from the stratosphere. Putin was re-elected as president of Russia. François Hollande was elected as president of France, and Barack Obama was re-elected. So 2012, old, but not that old. Perhaps some things you remember from that time. And at that time, I went to see a classic JUG, I guess, in the little town I was living in, which is called Clermont-Ferrand. My first GDC, yeah, that's an important event. First Global Day of Code Retreat is something you remember. And I went to see the talk from David Gageot, which is called Du legacy au cloud en moins d'une heure. And the rough traduction will be from legacy to cloud in less than an hour. And that day, David did something really strange. In fact, most of his presentation wasn't on slides, but it was on code in an IDE. And he said, okay, I have this code. You know, it's 2012. And he said, in less than an hour, it will be clean and in the cloud. So for us, cloud wasn't something really obvious. And this code is not that clean. Perhaps you can find some things you can say about that code. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's a really important code for the customer. There are two classes here, item, which we are not allowed to update unless we're hungry the goblin living upstairs. That's written in the specification, you can check. So this one, we can't update it. We can update that, and we want to update that to add a new feature. We won't add the feature, we'll just update that code so we actually understand what it's doing. Some insight, some functional insight we have. There's a sell-in, it's the number of days remaining to sell the item. The quality, telling how precious the item is, and the name of the item. There are various items, and some of them have special rules, special business rules to upgrade quality and sell in every day. So that's the code base we're gonna work on too. And I'm not that fan of that code base, so I want to rewrite that a little bit, and that's what David did that day. But before rewriting that, we want to build a solid safety net of tests. So let's create a test. Yes, I'm using Eclipse and not IntelliJ for the integration of that plugin, which is called Infinitest. And it's this plugin who started the test, and it will run the test related to the code I'm updating. The plugin exists on IntelliJ, but the feedback loop is way longer. And for me, that's enough to keep using Eclipse on a daily basis. In fact, this plugin was created by David Gageot, the guy who did the presentation. And I discovered this plugin existence that day. So what he did was, okay, so let's see what this code does. So let's update the quality for one day because we have no test. Let's build some, and since we have fixtures, so we'll try to use that and see what happens. Okay, so I'm just gonna create gilded rows with the fixture I have. Okay, I'm not that fan of that name here yet. I'm just gonna call that items since it will be easier to understand. So I'm just doing a little refactoring, and I just want to add a static import of that. So I add that in a variable, so I can do the operation I want to test, and I can make some assertions. So like David did, I'm gonna use author-G. At that time, that was quite new for me, but right now, I guess every Java developer is using author-G. So don't hesitate to ask questions if you have any. I'm going fast, that's the goal, but you can stop me anytime you want. And here I want the sell-ins to contain exactly something. I don't know why. I can go through the code, reflect, talk to the business expert, but there's one thing I know. The code is doing the right thing. It's the production code, and they're happy with that. The business rules are okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, okay, I want 0 of course it's wrong, but Infinitest will start my test and give me the right answer, the right value. So I can put the right value in here, do some little refactoring like adding static import and stuff like that. And then I can do the same thing for the quality. Infinitest will start the test, give me the correct answer, the correct value, and I can put that here. Easy. So I have a first test case, and perhaps I'm done with the test. I have enough tests to do whatever I want on the code without breaking that. So I'm just gonna check the code coverage. So what are the line of code in which I'm passing with my test? So green, I'm going on all lines. Yellow, I'm missing some cases, some branches, and red, I never went in that code. Okay, so missing test cases here. I'm just gonna try to do the same thing for 2 days. Do you know, perhaps that will be better. So just updating 2 times. And I have different values. So here I have some value decreasing, this 9 become an 8. And I have some value, no, everything is decreasing in there except that -1, which remain at -1, but okay. And the quality is also moving. So I have some decreasing and some increasing. For example, that 1 became a 2. Okay, so right now, perhaps I have enough tests. Do you know? Okay, still not enough. We can go on and on like that for a long time, but we don't have that long time. So what I will do is that I will compare the actual code, the Gilded Rose code, and itself. So I will duplicate the Gilded Rose code and rename that to golden, because that technique to check code against existing code is called a golden master. That's just one way of doing a golden master. You can extract data and check that, but that means you have serialization to do, and I'm too lazy for that. So I just check that my code should behave like golden master. Okay, I just create a Gilded Rose with a set of items, and I create a golden master with the same items, because that's the whole point of that. So, and I'm just gonna do an update for, let's say, 100 days. We'll see what happens.
Hey, Colin,
Yes.
quick question. What is the name of the plugin again?
The plugin starting the test, it's called Infinitest.
Okay, thank you.
The plugin for coverage, it's Jacoco, like in Java code coverage. And the plugin for mutation is Pitsclips, because it's the integration for ptest. But we haven't seen that right now.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, so I'm updating both of them, and then I want to do that, except here I don't have the value because every day it's gonna update. So I'm just gonna check what happens on the golden master. So I want my golden master. I just want the selling here. So unfortunately, I have no getter, so I can't use method reference for that, but that's not a problem. And here I need to make an array out of the stream. So, you know, I really like Java. Like really, I like the way it works, the toolings we have. But that kind of syntax doesn't help. When somebody tells me, you know, Java, it's verbose, the syntax is too heavy, this doesn't help. I just want an array from a stream. So that's not that great, but once you know it, that's easy. Okay, and I do the same thing for the quality. And right now, I'm gonna check the coverage again. And I have 100% coverage, but there's a problem with code coverage, because if I remove that, I'll still be at 100% coverage because my code is going in all cases. So what I want to do is I'm gonna do a mutation test. So the tool is gonna mutate my code, doing hundreds and hundreds of mutation, and run the test. If the test keeps working with code doing something different, we call that a survivor, and that's not a good use in that case. And here I have 100% mutation coverage. ungilded rows. So that means I'm probably safe to refactor everything I want. So I can close the test and go back to my code. And no, I can start working on the code. If I break something, a test will break. And that's a good news. Okay, so I start by a little formatting because that's the way I'm used to see code. And I'm just gonna do some readability stuff, here, for example, I can do an enhanced loop. Perhaps that's better. Here, I see that I have some special cases handled here, checking the names. I'd like to know how many special cases I have. So I'm just going to extract constants out of that. I don't care that much to have the constants here, but I want to know how many special cases I have to handle. So that's 3. And that's all. Okay, so there are 3 special items working with different rules. And I'd like to know what's happening to those items, but here I have a problem. The code is written upside down because there's a negation here. So I need to negate all special cases to have normal cases. It's really easier to invert this condition and to have the special cases first and then the normal cases. So here I can see all that block is for edge Y and backstage pass. And all that part here, it's only for backstage pass. So for me, that's not a good news. I'd like to have some piece of code for each one of these. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate all of that because things always often get worse before they get better, I guess. And I'm gonna say the first one is for edge Y and the second one is for backstage pass. And it's still working. Every time I'm saving my code, the tests are run and I have an instant feedback. So if that works, I mean, I can delete all that code because that's dead code. And I can delete that condition. So now I have just 1, 2 level of logic in backstage pass. So here, perhaps we can read the code a little bit. If my quality is under 50, I will increase it. If my quality is under 50, I increase it. If my quality is under 50, I increase it. Okay, perhaps I can move that. So the block enclosing all my logic upper, and it's still working and it's easier for me to read. So great. I have my logic for edge Y. I have my logic for backstage pace. Now let's see the logic for all over cases. No, that's not all over cases. That's except sulfurous. Here I have something for every item except sulfurous. And here I have something for every item except sulfurous. I remember the business expert telling me sulfurous is a legendary item. It doesn't move, it doesn't change in time. So perhaps I can try that and that works. So that means I can just keep all that. And so I can remove the condition and it's still working. And now I see that the selling, the thing that we are doing every day is lost in the middle of the code. So I can put it at the beginning. And here my test is red. I broke something. That's because here I have some values, some hard-coded values. And in fact, if I talk to a business expert or read me in this project, 11 and 6 doesn't mean anything for on a backstage pass for a business expert. 10 and 5 mean something for them. So having a more logical algorithm bring back some business values. So now I'd like to have all that code merged in the port here. So let's see, again, it's upside down. So let's try to invert some if. Okay, if edge Y, so I take that condition, put that here. I take that piece of code and I put that here. And now I need to delete the content of that if block. But deleting an if is complicated. So I can invert that and delete the else. That's easy to do. Okay, and I can do the same thing here. I invert the if, take that block, put that here, take that logic here, put that here. I can invert the if and delete the else. Oh, and not the bracket. Okay, so what's remain is that, the normal item. So I can take that and I can delete all of that. And that's still working. I'm sure I didn't break anything there. So perhaps you are seeing some other things to do. For example, I'm not that great in mathematics, but I think this should be 0. And perhaps it will be easier to understand. So, okay, and now I can start to extract some methods. So this decrease quality. Okay, this increase quality. And perhaps we can extract just methods for that. This is update normal item. This is update backstage pass. And this is updated HY. So we can still do a lot more on that code. There's a lot more things to do, but that's not the goal. Perhaps we can just check compared to what we had like 15 minutes back now. So we had that code. Now we have that code. It's more line, in fact, but it's easier to understand. It's easier to update. It's easier to add new features in that. It's not perfect, but done is better than perfect. So we were able to go without any possible regression from something that we don't want to touch at all, that we don't want to update because we will introduce regression, to something that will be pretty easy to update, even if it's not perfect, even if there's a lot left to do. And that's almost what David did on that day. He did that at a slower pace, but I feel it at that pace. For me, that was magic. That was incredible. I was looking at somebody doing a show, an incredible show. But you know, that was not my job. Yeah, I'm a developer. We're in 2012. I'm a developer. I'm doing code. I have problems with framework, database, servers, and stuff like that. And I'm delivering to production twice a year. So this is my daily job as a developer. I enjoyed the show very much, but that's too far from what I'm doing. So, I was pretty sure that he had everything set up, especially for that talk, that he had some workspace with a lot of shortcuts dedicated to that. So just came back from the talk and keep doing what I do, which is basically writing a bug so I can fix it later on. You know, because that's my job as a developer. I write code and there's bug in it. That's a fact. There is bug in code. We can do nothing about that. And we are late on schedule on everything. That's a developer's job. So I keep doing that, no problem. I just seen a great talk. I keep automating the test because I like that. I think this adds value, even if it took me some time to do that. And I keep going to meetups and reading books and going to talk and to conference and reading. And one day, I can't really remember when, but one day I realized that the talk I've seen from David was not just a talk. It wasn't for the show. In fact, David was showing us something really close to his daily job, something really close to what he's doing, to what's being a developer is for him. What I've seen that day is somebody practicing some software craftsmanship. I'm not sure that means something, practicing software craftsmanship, because that's more of an idea. That's, okay, I want to use the best methodology to be faster, to write great code. But what I'm sure is that David just showed us who is working on a daily basis. And that was not my daily basis. So I kept going on, kept doing tests. And one day I read about TDD, of course. So test-driven development. We can also talk about types-driven development, but that's something else. So test-driven development, pretty easy. You write the test and your test must be read. That means it fails. If it doesn't compile, it fails. So that's easy. You write a test that fails. The simplest test, calling the simplest API. Then you make it pass with the most straightforward implementation you can think of. And then you refactor because you probably did a mess. So you are trying to have a clean implementation and you are starting that back. That's really easy. Like it's 3-step. You can explain that in a matter of seconds. And I started to do that, doing my test, then making it pass, then doing a little bit refactoring. But it took me time again, like years, to understand that doing a red test, making a straightforward implementation and doing some refactoring, that's not test-driven development. That's test first, probably. And one day I decided to read the name, test-driven development. Your development must be driven by your test. You're not trying to test your code. At the end, you'll have tests, but that's not the goal. That's just an happy side effect. The goal is to have a design, an emerging design. You are not trying to test everything. So test-driven development, it's not about tests. Actually it is, but it's more about design than about test. So it took me years, I think, to understand that and to reach a point where I was really faster working in TDD than without test. But it's faster at a point where you have no chance of reaching that velocity without doing test. That's impossible. The feedback loop are really too short. I literally have a button saying whether or not I did something wrong. If I did a boo-boo, I need less than a second to know that. And so I can get back on what I did. And this really quick feedback allows me to have a really high velocity and to build something of better quality. So that's a great tool. It takes months to learn, at least. But that's a great tool that I see that day, because the refactoring you did is just a part of TDD. The refactoring technique, how to use your tools to do those refactoring really fast, really easily, is just a part of that. But that's an important part. Then I understood that tests don't take time. In fact, they allow you to have a higher velocity. So I started to write tests with value. And with value, as soon as I write them, they are allowing me to be faster in a matter of seconds. So I have the units and social test. I call them social. I got that name from Martin Fowler blog. Because when you talk about unit tests, people always think that a unit test must test one class, one method. That's not the case. A unit test tests a functionality. That's a functional unit. That's not a technical unit. So then you have your integration test. Is my code working with somebody else's code? That can be a database, a framework, or whatever, any API. Okay, I'm testing the integration with something else. I have contract test. As soon as I expose a contract to somebody else, I can break that without being explicit about that. So I expose the contract and I test that. So I'm sure I don't make any breaking change to the contract. Component test is my component isolated from the other part of the system working. Is the workflow okay? Okay, that's the point where I need to deploy something. Then I can start my end-to-end test. Then I can start the properties test. That's everything that's really important, but not directly functional. Performance, security, stuff like that. If your business operation are okay, but take 2 minutes to answer, that's probably not okay. So perhaps you want to automate that. And then you have the exploratory tests, the ones that are really hard to automate. So I started to write tests with dedicated tools on each levels of that pyramid, always trying to have the shortest possible feedback loop. The feedback loops I wrote here are really the maximum value I can accept. Because as you've seen, for unit test, I have a feedback in a few milliseconds. So 2 seconds will drive me crazy, like really. Okay, so I have those tests with high value, and I'm still reading books, and many books are giving reference to one book. A book with a nickname that's frightening, something that they call the Big Blue Book. It's a book from 2003, so that's something old, written by Eric Evans, and it's domain-driven design, tackling complexity in the art of software. So I read that, and I didn't understand anything, and I read another book on that by Vaughn Vernon, and I didn't understand anything, and I talked about that with a lot of people. And I exchange on that. And what's that DDD everybody's talking about? Is this really something? Is it just an idea? Is it code? Is it something else? So I explore that, talking to people, going to conferences, and at a point, I can't really remember when, again, I understood that doing domain-driven design doesn't mean anything, but if you start to put some domain-driven design, to use some domain-driven design tools in your code, it's totally doable to have a domain model, some code that will represent the domain, some code that the domain expert can understand, and they will be able to say, yes, that's the domain, that exists, or that doesn't, and that should not be possible. So once you have that domain model, you'll have to protect that in some kind of architecture. So there are lots of them out there, but I like to use the ports and adapter architecture, which is also called the hexagonal architecture. But the architecture is just a detail. Architectures come and go. What's important is the domain model, the domain code, the business value, the business operation, the fact that you can't code something that can't exist. That may sound stupid, but if it's stupid for the business expert, that should not be possible in the code. I don't know if I made my point here, but I'm working for insurance right now. And in their system, you can have an insurance for a dangerous drug with a birth date and a family of music instruments, because all options are flattened. And of course, that's stupid to have an insurance for a violin, for a pitbull violin. That doesn't make any sense, but that's possible in their model. So you can write domain model that will block that. And I discovered a lot of other things thanks to that conference, because I understood that something else exists. I wasn't ready to understand that by the time of the conference, but with time, learning, talking to people, going to meetups, listening to conference, I learned a lot. And right now, I'm still Colin Damon. I'm still more than ever, I think, a passionate Java developer. I'm really enthusiastic about test-driven development and domain-driven design. I write some blog posts because I like to share what I learn, sometimes the hard way, so people can learn it in an easier way. Sometimes I talk in events, and I like to do some code during the talks. I'm part of the Lyon Software Crafter, remember, which is the software craftsmanship meetup group in my city. We are doing one event every week. So there's a group of people, a meetup group, doing one event every week around software craftsmanship, and we really enjoy organizing that. That's really great. I wrote a white paper, that's a little book, called Clean Coding. Don't mislead it with clean code, not related. I also code on the Twitch channel of our company, which I'm managing, and I'm doing live coding and kata and talks twice a week. So if you add event from Lyon Software Crafter and this one, that's 3 events a week at least. I'm also managing the internal program, the internal mentorship program we have around software craftsmanship with our colleagues, of course. And I like beers and metal music. But most of all, right now, my daily routine has changed a lot. I don't have bugs anymore, or really few. That's not the main point of my day. That's not the problem I'm trying to solve. One of the most annoying problem I have right now is to have some task left in the backlog, because that can evaporate quite fast. I have problems also having, I don't know, enough work to do, enough things to do, not going too fast for the colleagues, not following those methodologies, because those techniques, those ways of seeing code allows a really higher velocity, a really easier life, because you are not wakened by night because your production is blown, because you have a bug. You're not spending your time trying to patch things that are just crashing. You're adding values in software, so the customers can have a, I don't know, better life in sometimes, depending on what you are doing. You can bring great values without need to maintain it a lot. You can add things, you can respond to change. I'm thinking back to the daily, to classic days back at that time, and it's almost like I'm not doing the same work anymore. It's almost like I've changed job, but I'm still a Java developer. Just thanks to that talk, I discovered that there is another way to be a Java developer. And so far, I'm really, really enjoying that new way of being a developer. So I think I didn't miss any question in the chat. Perhaps you're shy and you can ask question right now. No question at all? I was that annoying? Functional tests.
Oh, it was cool.
Where are functional tests? So I have a question. What's a non-functional test? Marwan, okay, I take your question. I just want to see with Mikhail. I hope I'm not. I'm seeing your name well. So I often have this question: where are your functional tests? Where are the acceptance tests? And to be totally honest, I don't really know what's a non-functional test. All tests are functional. A unit test a functional unit. A component test a functional workflow. An integration test, okay, that's not really a functional test. That's just some technical wiring. But every test is functional, even an integration test, because if you can't put data in your database, your application is probably not that much functional. So every test is a functional test. I don't know if that answer. Don't hesitate if I don't understand the questions. Marwan, where should we start? So I'm gonna answer to where should we start to learn software craftsmanship. And if that's not your question, don't hesitate to ask for something else. Is your blog in English? No, most of the blog posts I'm doing are in French, but I think you can Google trad that. I'm posting on my company's blog because I'm too lazy to maintain something. So I'm going to answer to where should we start to learn software craftsmanship? I don't know. In fact, I'm not sure I can answer that. I can answer that depends, but I'm not sure that helps. You have to start where it's the most obvious for you, where you will get the greatest value. That's to start with the methodologies, but where to start and what I'd like to know when I started is go to Software Crafters group. That's too easy to learn there. Go there. There are coding dojos. So this is places, safe places where we are doing code kata. So that's stuff like Gilded Rose we saw today because it's called a code kata. And you will find people helping you to master, I don't know, that may be type-driven development, that can be test-driven development, that can be refactoring, that can be anything. So going to Software Crafter group is a really, really easiest. And I'd like, I don't know to say that, but that would have helped me a lot if I had known back in the time that those groups exist. So go to meetup.com, find a software crafter group, and just go there, and you'll see what happened. I don't know if that answered. Don't hesitate again. Could you expand on test first versus test-driven development? Yes. In test first, you are doing the test, then you are doing the code. In test driven, you are doing the test, then you are doing the code. No, sorry. Test driven, let's take a GPS. You know something, you say, okay, I want to go there. And you enter that, and he will give you the best way to go to the location. Test first is a GPS saying, okay, you enter the address in your GPS and the GPS says, okay, go there. And when you'll be there, I'll tell you you are there. So that's test first, because you are doing the tests, but you are not writing something that will help you going step by step to your destination. Your GPS will say, okay, turn left at the end of the road. And if you don't turn left, it will say, okay, no problem, I got your back. You can turn right at the end of this road and we'll be back on a suitable road. And your GPS, you have the remaining time which is decreasing as you're advancing to your destination, as you're getting closer to your destination. TDD is the same thing. You have, but the challenging part is that you have to learn how to write the test that will bring you to the next step, and not the one that will bring you to the final result, which won't help at all.
So would you say that test first is a subset of test-driven development, because you would test, some method first and then have it fail and then expand on that, so then it becomes test-driven?
I think every people I know that are working in test-driven development right now started by doing test first and say that they were doing test-driven development. I'm the first one who did that. I was saying, okay, I'm doing test-driven development because, red, green, refactor, that's test-driven development. I'm doing my test, blah, blah, blah. And years later, I understood that, no, I wasn't doing test-driven development because the tests weren't driving my development. My development was driven by the things I've in my head. Like, in fact, I was making my design up front in my head and having tests matching that. So that's test first. And I think test first is needed to learn test-driven development. That's on the way to learn test-driven development. You have to learn test first, because that will teach you about the tools, the difficulties, how to write testable code and stuff like that. And then when you are comfortable enough with test first, you'll have an epiphany and start test-driven development, start relearning test-driven development.
When I think about this, I think test first is kind of, okay, this works. But then test-driven development, you're thinking more about the various cases that you would need to cover in whatever it is that you're building, right? Whereas the other way, the test first, it's sort of just, okay, I have a test, I have proven I can make it work. But when you're practicing sort of test-driven development, you have this whole sort of testing suite almost, a number of different tests that are going to evaluate against the way that you're writing your actual code, and I don't know, that it is very hard to differentiate between the two.
In fact, when I explain it, I do a test-driven development kata. So today we did a refactoring kata, but there are test-driven development kata, and it's easy to show using a test-driven development kata, but that may be hard to explain. Perhaps we can sum that up in a sentence saying, test first is about tests, and test-driven development is about design. That's not the same goal. At the end, you have test, you have code, not the same code, and not at the same pace, not with the same velocity. I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, I think it does. I was going to ask how you stay so motivated to constantly be practicing, to be involved in all these events and groups, to be able to be so quick and so fast. I mean, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. So, I mean, I was curious as to what your recommendations are to stay motivated in, when technologies are changing so quickly, and you need to constantly be on sort of the front end of those changes that are coming in to stay relevant. How do you recommend that?
That's the first point on the first slide. I'm a passionate Java developer. I really like coding. Like if I'm not coding for a week, I'm really sad. So No, I think that's the whole point. No, in fact, there are other points. I don't know how to say that, so that may sound rude in English because I don't have the words, but my body is kind of broken, so there are not that much thing I can do. And I'm really lucky that I love development and I can do that without suffering. So I'm just enjoying the things I can do. Don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's always interesting to see, sort of from a software craftsmanship standpoint. I think that it equips people with amazing tools and amazing methodology, sort of to tackle solutions.
But nowadays, those methodologies allows me to be like really faster. So perhaps that's counterproductive because I have to work less to build more things. So that means I get to code less in time, on a week. So perhaps that's counterproductive right there. That's an interesting point. I'm just gonna take the other question. How do you tackle dependencies when designing / writing tests? I mean, in terms of mindset more than the tools. The code source showcase TDD pretty well, but this is far from real world scenario. Do you go with larger and complex projects? That's a false question, and I only have 3 minutes left and a lot of questions to answer. That's part of the. That's an important part to why learning TDD takes years, and why somewhere in your path learning TDD you'll have to put some domain-driven design in it, whether you know that or no. But splitting things, designing is the key. And then there are many schools of TDD that can help. You can search about London School or Chicago schools and stuff like that. So the answer is kind of vague, but I don't have any short answer on that, except that's complicated, but when you're used to that, that's great. I would like if we could have a future JUG session with Colin. Yeah, no problem. Test first also does us operating on refactor mercilessly. Yes, that's a good point. I think Alfonso. What test frameworks are you using? That's not. Yeah, that's something important in craftsmanship. We are using the tools at their best, but they are just here to help us. That's not the goal. But right now I'm using JUnit and AuthorG and from time to time Mockito, but I'm not a mockist, so I don't use that much mock. What can make that happen? Oh, okay. And any suggested reading, your top 3 recommendations. So I have an article with my reading recommendation. So let me take that because my memory sucks a little bit. So I'm just gonna check what I wrote on that. Depending on what you want to learn, because that's important, but I think a good start is The Clean Coder, not Clean Code, The Clean Coder by Uncle Bob. So Robert Cecil Martin. And then, yes?
Oh, I was just going to say, if you send me the text of the titles, then I can just post it on the YouTube link once we have this posted. That'll answer that question.
Yeah. Using encapsulation, design pattern, mitigate dependencies. Yes. That's the point. Encapsulation, design patterns, understanding what's an aggregate is that's something from domain-driven design. Understanding what a bounded context is, a value object. So the building blocks from domain-driven design helps a lot. And then you have to know your design patterns, etc. on that. And I think we are out of time. So I won't make you wait that much, but I can stay a little bit longer, but let's try to respect the time.